thank you everyone for joining our next instalment of the CWS webinar series. This one's Children of Devolution standing for election. We're in quite a unique place for this election. For the first time 5 years ago, we weren't really in the same place we are now, where we've got a cohort of candidates this time that have grown up under devolution, been educated, got their first jobs, been university, and actually built families and tried to build a life here in Wales under devolution for the past 20 odd years. Saying that, I'm delighted to be joined by Joe Williams, who's the Conservative candidate for Cardiff North, and James Evans, who's the Conservative candidate for Brecon and Radnorshire. These two are both people in their 20s that are standing for this election. So we're going to get a great insight into what really for them, what's their experience firsthand at devolution, because for the past 20 years, we've had mostly men in grey suits from Labour politicians that have run Wales and haven't actually experienced the fruits of their, well, some would say Labour, some would not say Labour. So yeah, we'll jump straight into it. We'll start with you, Joel. What was it growing up that made you want to stand for election, got involved in politics? What did you see growing up through your schooling, through your education, through getting your jobs, first jobs here in Wales? What was it to you that struck out that it wasn't realised the devolution wasn't really working for you and working for people around your generation?
Well, firstly, thanks, Ed. It's great to be part of the Centre for Welsh Studies webinar. We're 7 days out from a major election. I see it as a crossroads election for us in Wales. And, you know, candidates from the Conservative Party up and down Wales, we're doing the best job that we can to set out a positive message, because things don't have to be the way they are in Wales. And actually, you know, we're in a current state of managed decline. And that is something that voters keep telling us. And look, you know, I mean, I got involved to make a positive difference. I was challenged by my local councillor. If you want to make a difference, get involved and don't just criticise from the sidelines. Get involved and try and make a positive difference. This election is absolutely key for how we're going to recover from the pandemic, how we're going to support our public services, how we're going to allow businesses to recover. And you know what? I really do believe that voters are telling us it's time for change. And for me, Ed, and I'm sure James will agree, it's now or never. It's make or break. And, you know, I'm excited, but it's not over yet. We're going to run a positive campaign.
James, what was it growing up really for you that was the main issue that you thought, actually, this isn't the way it's been currently around at the moment for me, Wales isn't currently how it should be. There is a better way. There is a second avenue of doing things.
Joe, back to your original question, and thank you for calling me in my 20s. Tomorrow I turn the big 3-0, so I think I just make this webinar by the skin of my teeth in a few hours. So I think going back to your original question, why did I get into politics? I got into politics to make a difference. I really do care about my community here in Brecon and Radnor. I'm Brecon and Radnor first. I always say that, you know, I didn't stand for anywhere else in the general election. This is the only place that I care about. It's my home. It's where my family live. It's where my children go to school. It's where I love. And the reason why I first got involved in politics was, you know, I worked for the local authority for a while, and I'd just seen firsthand what budget cuts that were coming from Welsh Government to local authorities are actually doing to residents in our area. You know, that goes from the hyper-local things to potholes, to street lights, but to the bigger decisions around local school closures. And the real thing that really got me politicised was the closure of my high school, Gwynedd High School, which we managed to keep open. But that was driven by centralised budget cuts from Welsh Government to local rural councils. They don't understand rural Wales. They only understand, sorry, Joel, I know you're in Cardiff, but they only really understand Wales, what is below the M4 corridor. They tend to forget everything that's north of there. We've seen lack of investment in infrastructure. We've had, you know, there's lack of everything. You know, from farming side of things, our farmers have been neglected for years. I'm afraid devolution has, I wouldn't say failed Wales, but it isn't working in its current form. And as Joel and others have said, we are at a crossroads now. Another 5 years of Welsh Labour, probably either propped up by their partners in crime currently, the Liberal Democrats or Plaid Cymru. I really do fear for the future of our nation. Where are we going? Because you've got the Labour Party, which are teetering around. Are we for independence? Are we not for independence? It sounds like their Brexit, you know, position. They didn't know where they stand. And if they're being kept in government by a nationalist party or the Liberal Democrats who want to turn us into some federalist state, I do worry where we are going to go. And I think that people go into the ballot box in May need to bear that in mind, that when you vote for a Conservative candidate like Joel, myself and others, you're voting for a party which has got the union on the line. We are here to back the union. That's what we are about. That's what I'm about, especially in a border constituency where it means so much. But it's a long-winded answer to answer your question. I only normally use 10 words to say 100, but I thought I would bump that one out a little bit.
Well, just getting prepared just in case you do get elected next week. You're just getting the just amount of right or waffle just in case.
I've never believed in waffle. There's too many politicians that waffle on and say nothing. It's about time we had some straight answers from straight.
Exactly. And look, one of the things I'd like to point and to touch on is that obviously in Wales, we've seen the Wales slide down the education leaderboards over the past 20 years, which has been obviously a great worry for all of us because we all care about the future generations. There's no tomorrow without the next generation, and you've constantly got to be looking forward to that. Do you think Labour have taken their eye off the ball the last 10 years on education? Do you feel there's not been much of a threat to them? Do you feel that it's more been a constant evolution of politicking, growing a state that works around with them? Like you say, we're talking here, as it's so long in Wales, we're talking more about who Labour are going to go into partnership with and talking the real issues that people have got, whether it be their children's education, whether it be the roads that they drive on, whether it be infrastructure. Do you think, I'll put this to both of you, we'll start with you, James, do you think that's the real issue here, that for too long it has been the Labour show and there's not been enough actual eyesight, enough evidence on the issues, enough a spotlight on the issues?
My personal view is on education. We've seen education standards improving in England. We've seen free schools and academies being rolled out there. And I've said it can save rural schools if you do that. And it actually improves educational standards in some settings. But the Welsh Labour government like being different for different sake. I've always had a philosophy in life that no one has got a monopoly on good ideas. But unfortunately with Welsh Labour, they've played politics with the people of Wales's lives for far too long. Now, I've got a child in education myself. I'm very worried about the future of education in Wales, where it's going. The new curriculum has come out. Parts of that I agree with, parts of it I'm not so keen on. I'll pick one of those parts now. It's actually primary school children and actually ramming down the throats of young kids, sexual education at a young age. Is that right? That's sexualizing young children. It's something I don't agree with. And I'm sure 90%, 99% of the parents in Brecon and Radnorshire don't agree with. Relationship education, I totally agree with that. I think it's right. It does stop bullying in schools, but sexualizing kids at a young age in primary school is totally unacceptable. But as I said, we've slid down the PISA leaderboards over the years. It's just not good enough. And I said Welsh Labour have been too focused on vanity projects in, sorry Joel again, in South Wales, neglecting other parts of Wales and taking their eye off the ball. And we've got an education minister who is actually the current sitting AM in Brecon and Radnorshire. Got the Liberal Democrats claiming education standards in Wales need to get better, but they're culpable for everything that's gone wrong in Wales in the last 5 years. But in typical Lib Dem fashion, they just try and hide away from the actual real issues facing people in Wales. And Joel's been in school quick before, more recently than I have. I'm sure Joel has got a more.
Yeah, what's your take on this? Do you think the Labour have taken it out of the ball? Do you think it's the complacency has seeped in over the 20 odd years? Do you think that's what the issue is here, Joel? Because like you say, these issues, and it's not even now we're at election time, is there one chance where if you've been in record with the government for 20 odd years, this should be where you rack out a long list of achievements, shouldn't it? Surely this should be the chance for you to say 20 odd years in power, but they can't do that at the NHS because obviously that has been in such a bad way just long before the pandemic, and whether it be education sliding down the table. So what's your take on it, Joel?
Well, the thing is, I have this question is how bad do things have to get before we vote for change? And, actually we speak to voters and they run off a list of issues, bins, for example. So that's local government. NHS waiting times, struggling to access swift treatment for cancer and other issues, for example. Education, another issue, not having access to local excellence in education. And the truth is, when we remind voters that these are the responsibilities of the Welsh Government and the Senedd, and therefore the responsibility of Welsh Labour for the past 22 years, they're actually quite taken aback. And if we're talking about education, what we need to talk about is that, our education system is very intertwined with England, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. So, for example, the question that I put to a number of school governors a few years ago was, if we've got this new curriculum and we're having GCSEs and A-levels in Wales, what assurance can we give that these grades will be recognised by universities in England, Scotland, and Northern Ireland? Because what we're already seeing are institutions outside of Wales refusing to recognise Welsh qualifications, such as the Welsh baccalaureates, for example. Now, if you couple that with 50% of Welsh students who go away to university, they don't come back to Wales. And it's not because we haven't got a beautiful country, it's because we haven't got the jobs and the employment opportunities. Now, Labour have been responsible for economic development in Wales for the past 22 years. And you know what? James and I were in politics to make a positive difference. James and I are happy to take on board the responsibility, okay, and the scrutiny that comes with being in office. If you listen to the Labour Party, it is everyone's fault but their own. And actually, if you look at the past 22 years and you ask them to name their 10 best initiatives and policies, you won't hear them. And therefore, it brings us back to this: how bad does it need to get? And our message to voters on the 6th of May is give change a chance. We're not asking for 22 years, we're asking for 5 years. And in those 5 years, we will prove to the people of Wales how things should be done and how things can be done.
Well, we'll go on to questions again later, but we've just got one that I think fits in really, really well here. And this is, I think this is the key worry here. Now, people have woken up to devolution. We had a question here from someone earlier. It said, do you worry that devolution now means that it's higher taxes through the back door thanks to tax raising powers? People now have seen this as devolution starting to get a bad image, or only a tainted image of devolution. When I don't know, both you two are sitting councillors. Do you see that as devolution that can be used for a force for good then? Or, because obviously you two have been councillors, you used it at the most local level possible, do you see that it can be a force for good? Or do you start to take on board now the worries of these people where they say, is devolution just a way to higher taxes through the back door? Is it a way of another bureaucratic level?
Yeah, well, we've already seen higher taxes in Wales. If you look at stamp duty, for example, that's been hiked up in Wales. If you look at the temporary pause to stamp duty in England, the rate was not passed on in Wales. So we're already seeing the Welsh Labour Party roll out increased taxes hitting Welsh taxpayers. And, you know, for me, I actually would love to be in a position where we can use the powers of the Senedd to demonstrate how things are done, and actually Wales can be a beacon and an example to others. But instead, we are always left behind. And you know what? I get incredibly angry and frustrated because James will have heard this. We hear from a lot of Welsh nationalists and they say, you're not truly Welsh if you are a Conservative. We are proudly Welsh, but we are proudly British. And we will fight for Wales's part of the United Kingdom. And James is absolutely right. The question of whether or not Wales should remain part of the United Kingdom is on the ballot paper on the 6th of May. And it's for this simple reason. Welsh Labour will not come down on a side because they know that they are going to need the support of probably the Liberal Democrats. That is, if they're still there, I think they're going to be wiped out. And I think James is going to wipe them out in Brecon and Radnorshire. We're all behind you there. But they're going to need the support of Plaid Cymru. And what is Plaid Cymru's ask going to be? It's going to be a referendum. And we don't need this right now. We need to recover from the pandemic. We don't need tax rises either.
I completely agree. And James, asked the question, does being a councillor show to you that maybe that actually, if the Welsh Conservatives and you got elected, you and Joel, that maybe that devolution and power can be wielded in the correct way to help? Because I know, for example, you were part of the team to build the first council houses in a generation in power. So do you see there is an opportunity to use devolution and the powers that the Senedd has in the right way? Do you think for Labour it's been little too much of wasted powers?
I think the problem is with the Welsh Government and the Labour Party, the Plaid Cymru, Liberal Democrats, they keep crowing on about more and more powers going to Cardiff Bay. But the problem is with the Cardiff Bay establishment, they believe in devolution, but only devolution to the Senedd. and more centralisation of powers, which is a typical socialist way of thinking. Proper devolution is, like Joel and I are councillors, is allowing those powers to transfer down to local councils to make decisions for local people on issues that matter to them most. I hope to represent, after May the 6th, well, May 6th, May 7th, they're doing the count, is a rural constituency which relies heavily on tourism. What we see now is Plaid Cymru, Labour, Liberal Democrats floating around this idea of a tourism tax. It's one of the biggest employers in rural Wales. It employs people and a massive source of economic development. And you're going to have a Welsh Labour government propped up by whoever who are going to impose taxes on a sector which creates jobs. It's a tax on jobs and a tax on people's livelihoods. But yet again, it's to fund vanity projects which go nowhere, which do nothing. Look at the M4 Relief Road. The biggest waste of money and the biggest travesty I think this country has ever seen in Wales. And I don't go, I think if you redistributed all the money that Welsh Labour spent on that project and actually give it to hard-working taxpayers in this country, there must be something like £100 each per household. There's a lot of money they've just wasted away, filtering people's money. They're poor managers, it's poor government. And the people in May will have a chance to vote for Joel, myself, and other Welsh Conservatives who want to have good government, small government, which actually puts the power of local decision-making in local councillors' hands, where they can make decisions that mattered for the most of the people we are all here to represent, not centralised in Cardiff Bay, being made by an elite class of politicians who've never had a job outside of politics, like the First Minister, and actually don't give a damn about the people of Wales.
Well, this is the interesting thing, is like you say, these flaws have been highlighted now, and we've seen throughout the pandemic of the past year, people have become more aware of the Senate and its powers. But you two have been out the doorstep, I suppose, quite a lot, I'm guessing. Do you sense that people understand what devolution is now? Because for so long, the truth be told, the devolution was a very foreign word to people. People didn't know what a Senate was, what an assembly was. People thought it was a debating chamber for people we don't really know about in Cardiff Bay. So do you feel like the tide has changed, that people are now understanding that actually I've got a Senate member as well as a member of Parliament, I've got a second government here in Wales? Do you think people have finally woken up to that? Do you sense that?
Yeah, most definitely. Let's not hide away from the fact, I think most Conservative voters, we've known this has hampered us for years, that Conservative voters haven't turned out in Assembly elections. There has been a massive lack of education of the public of Wales of actually what the Senate actually does and the powers it's had transferred to it. And I think that a lot of people in Wales have finally seen that the current devolution settlement has enabled the Welsh Labour government, propped up by the Lib Dems, to put an invisible wall between us and the rest of the United Kingdom. That is not what the people of Wales want. I talk to people, as Joel does, on a daily basis now, and all I am getting back time and time again is that there should have been a four nations approach to managing coronavirus. The First Minister has played politics with the hospitality industry and all industries across Wales and people's lives. I don't give credit to the First Minister. He said he will do it his own way, but that's fine. It's up to him what he does. But I still firmly believe, as Joel does and others, that we should have had a four nations approach, working together. You've heard the rumours that Nicola Sturgeon and Mark Drakeford were counter briefing, against the Prime Minister. It's just ridiculous. They had their arguments lined up for the even into Cobra meetings. They are here to represent the public of Wales. That's what they're here to do, and it should have worked closely with UK government. And actually, what they have done during this pandemic is make some people frightened to say, I'm English in Wales. Because you get some people saying, you don't belong here, get back from where you come from. It's created a sort of NIMBYism across Wales, which I've never seen before and I'm not comfortable with. But no, that's my view. And I do think the public this time really do understand what the Welsh government has powers over and just how much damage that can cause to the Welsh economy if you put it in the hands of a Labour Liberal Democrat government.
Yeah, I put the same question to you, George. Do you sense that something has changed fundamentally since the last time you were out on the doorstep for the Senate elections? Do you sense that people finally understand that there is separate leaders, separate entities, separate parties? Do you finally think that that message is finally getting through to the voters on the ground?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I agree with everything that James has said there. I think what we need to do, and what I'm focused on doing, I'm sure James is as well, is tackling this issue head on. And that is that there are a number of Conservatives in Wales, rightly or wrongly, who do not support the Assembly. Okay, now I'll make no bones about it. If I had a vote in 1997, I would have voted against establishing a Welsh Assembly. It's now a Senedd. For me, our focus has to be on making it work, using the powers to deliver meaningful change up and down Wales, not just in Cardiff, not just in the South Wales region, but across Wales. Now, my message to Conservative voters is I know for the past 20 years, you have stayed at home because you do not agree with the institution. If you stay at home this time, you will give Labour another 5 years. What's worse is you will give Labour, likely propped up by Plaid Cymru, another 5 years, and potentially a damaging referendum, greater powers, potentially federalism, which we know will be a total nightmare, something we do not want to see. And for those Conservatives who would like to protest and maybe consider vote abolish, unfortunately, the arithmetic is just not with you. A vote for abolish is a vote to give Labour another 5 years. That is not something that we want to see. The Welsh Conservative and Unionist Party is committed to using the powers of the Senedd to deliver meaningful change to people up and down across Wales. That's our pitch. It's on the ballot paper, and people can vote for it on the 6th of May.
Well, yeah, like you say, this time now we have a completely different option of what's on the ballot, and people actually are paying attention to the ballot. Do you think for too long devolution has been too confusing? Do you think that's part of the problem of why Labour have got away for, some would say, for so long with? You look around most nations and most formal governments, if it is in Westminster, if education had been on the slide so long, we've seen many of the major hospitals in, say, England under special measures like we have in Wales long before the pandemic. Do you think it's the complexity that has turned people off and has allowed what many would argue is bad governance to go on for so long?
As someone who's campaigned, I'm going to make this answer really short, around Brecon and Radford and other constituencies in Wales. If you listen to people who've been talked to by Labour Party members who go around canvassing, if they say the education system's failing in Wales, they say, oh yes, it's controlled by Westminster. They like to lie when it suits them and blame Westminster for everything. When it's going well, they like to say, oh yes, that's us, we've done that. But when it's going bad, they like to blame Westminster. And that is the current problem with devolution. And when you've got two governments working against each other, it doesn't work in the best interest of the people of the country. And that is why on May the 6th, people should go out, vote for the Welsh Conservatives, vote for us so we can have a joined up approach with the UK government to make sure we're growing, improving education standards, improving our hospitals, and having a joined up approach to growing the economy of the whole country, which creates jobs and opportunities for people right across Wales.
And Joel, do you think that's part of the problem now, the complexity of it all?
Well, it's
allowed this kind of this bad governance, like you say, for so long, like in Westminster, you just wouldn't be allowed to get away with this kind of thing, would you?
Well, I studied devolution law at Cardiff University, and not even I entirely understand all of the competencies that the Welsh government has. And, there are not, I think, following the pandemic, a lot of people now know what Mark Drakeford and the Welsh government are responsible for. A lot of people are quite shocked that he's got those far-reaching powers. I was quite shocked when I discovered that Mark Drakeford has the power to lock down people and shut down their businesses, and most importantly, shut down their businesses and not give them access to adequate financial support. Quite frankly, it's a disgrace. Now, I'll make the view quite clear. A vote for the Welsh Conservatives is a vote for a political party that will work with Westminster, because the fact is we need to work together. And, we need to work with Welsh Labour and we need to work with Plaid Cymru, because we're all going to need to work together to recover from this pandemic.
Do you think that's been part of the problem, that for too long we've seen Cardiff Bay and Westminster go at loggerheads instead of trying to work conducively? We've seen them try and score points in the media and with voters instead of working together to probably make the best policy for Wales.
James hit the nail on the head. What we see from the Senedd and from Welsh Government, Welsh Labour, when it's going right, it's all us. We did it. We're delivering for Wales. And when it goes wrong, it's never our fault. It is always Westminster's, or it's somebody else's fault. James and I want to take responsibility for the competencies that the Senedd has, and we will make it work. And let the public judge us in 5 years' time on our record. And you know what? I speak to a lot of voters, and when I speak to Labour voters, and I say, you know what, Labour's been in power for 22 years. Can you tell me a couple of things that they've done to improve your life? And I could be there all day, you know? And my message is, you know what? Change doesn't happen unless you vote for it. And if you're not happy, vote us out in 5 years' time. But we cannot go on in this one-party state because it is not healthy for democracy. It is holding Wales back. And, you know, I say this with reluctance, but the role of the First Minister is to act as the chief salesman for our country. Mark Drakeford is there to sell Wales to the world, to pick up the phone to big business, to get them to relocate, to deliver investment, job creation, economic prosperity. And the fact is, we have failed under Welsh Labour. Now, you know what? I'm not being critical without offering an alternative. We've got an alternative in Wales. We just need to vote for it.
And it's the point, Joel, isn't it, that people say, well, I'll vote for something different. I'll vote Plaid or Liberal Democrat. I'm afraid to say, in 22 years, those two parties have kept Labour in power in one form or another. There is only one party that will change Wales, and that is the Welsh Conservative Party, because a vote for anybody but us is a vote for Mark Drakeford and a vote for a chap who can't even get a suit that fits.
Absolutely.
Well, that's what we've had quite a lot of questions about. That it's not just actually the policy, the devolved competencies, which, for example, like you say, Joel, no one actually knows what the devolved competencies are, not even the Welsh office. But it's the fact that it's brought along so much baggage with it. I've had a lot of people say that it's not about education. It's about, we've seen nationalism funded and legitimised through devolution, and like you say, they've been into power. Do you think this time now, with how much Scotland has progressed, do you think this time we are on the verge of potentially entering the shattered abyss that we've seen with Scotland? That if Labour do get in this time, like we say, it's looking like a wipeout for the Democrats. There is only one potential party for the Labour Party to go into with. That we are a step away potentially from going down a very deep and dark nationalistic route, which could only lead to divide, because the referendum was 7 years ago in Scotland, and they're on a second or third election about it now. Do you think this is the big kicker with devolution that people didn't see coming down the line? And
yeah, I think, Ed, that there is a huge risk that actually we will end up in a position where, you know, if you look at the SNP, they're polling consistently over 40%. Okay, in some polls they're hitting 50%. Now, Plaid Cymru are consistently half that in the poll. Yet we are in this bizarre situation where we could have a party that, you know, 1 in 5 people in Wales support, dictating national constitutional policy. And we won't let that happen as a Welsh Conservative and Unionist party, but I suspect the Labour Party will, just to stay on in power. And there is a huge risk, because we know that any question of an independence referendum is a big no-no when it comes to confidence in Wales. If you're a business and you're considering relocating, leaving London, for example, I would love for you to come and relocate in Wales and create jobs in Wales. But if there is a question of independence, you're not even going to look at Wales. You're probably going to look at Bristol or Birmingham or other places in England. You know, we need to dispense with the talk of an independence referendum. I know the people of Wales do not want independence, but I also know that Welsh Labour can be very sneaky. And they will say when it suits them that they are a unionist party, but at the same time, if it suits them to stay in power, I suspect that they will open up the door to an independence referendum.
Yeah, and the same goes to you, James, especially your campaign on the border constituency. I guess it's more poignant and hits home even more so probably for you.
Yeah, to be honest, Ed, I think the first job of any government is to just get on with the job of delivering services and governing a country. Andrew R.T. Davis is right. We do not need constitutional chaos. We are coming out of the worst pandemic we have seen in a generation, the worst thing that's happened to this country since the Second World War. We need to be talking about recovery, getting our businesses back up and running, getting our children back up to the standards of education they were before, creating jobs, opportunities for people. The last thing people want to be doing coming out of a pandemic is going to the ballot box to vote in for an independence referendum. It's a distraction. It's a distraction tactic, and Welsh Labour will use it to hide away their failings of what they've done for the last 22 years. They blame Westminster for everything, when actually it's all been down to their failings is why Wales is in the state it is. The economy was failing before the pandemic. Our education system was failing before the pandemic, and our NHS was hemorrhaging at the seams before the pandemic. That is because of 22 years of Welsh Labour failings. And we just need a government after the election to get on with the job of improving Wales. And any talk of this nonsense of independence is a distraction from the real job of governing Wales. And I am sure that the residents Joel talks to and the people of Brecon and Radnorshire just want a government to get on and start delivering for Wales.
Yeah, because like I said, for me, what I found quite shocking, it seems to have slipped under the radar, which I think should be pointed out more, is that we've seen a change of tone in Labour. In Scotland, you sense there is unionism there. You sense there is a bit of patriotism to staying in the union. Whereas in Wales, we see Drakeford, these little lines, the end of the union. Then there's the fact that they've got 3 or 4 independence candidates. In Wales, although the polling isn't there to support them, the groundswell isn't there to support them, Labour seems to be a lot more further down the line when it comes to entertaining this fancy idea, don't they, compared to Scotland, which is a worry. Do you think this has been put across people enough? Do you think that people realise that there's this time it is a different kind of Labour Party? It isn't the one that's always said we believe in being the union. This time they've actually got candidates that are saying we'd like independence, we support some of the more extreme policies.
The reason why the Labour Party are saying are not taking a position is because they did it in the 2019 general election. Whatever happened in 2017, they have a wishy-washy position because they know they are on the ropes. The Welsh Conservative Party have got them on the ropes. Andrew Davies has got the First Minister on the ropes, and they will say and promise anything to get back into power, to keep their cushy little jobs in Cardiff Bay. That is the be-all and end-all of it. You've seen the First Minister go on telly the other day, basically saying to the people of Wales, vote for Labour, we'll keep the pubs open, don't, and they'll close. You know, just a blatant abuse of power. It is wrong. It's not what the people of Wales want. As I said, let's just have a government that governs for the people of Wales and delivers the services people want. But no, that's my response to it. I get quite angry about things like this.
I mean, I coming in on that, I actually thought, Drakeford has spent the last 12 months on a careful and cautious approach. Okay, so, I personally felt that the science meant that gyms should not have closed, okay, because the evidence that was developed and made available in sort of September of last year made it quite clear that the spread of the coronavirus was not taking place in our gyms or non-essential retail. But actually, Drakeford had a little look at the polls 2 weeks ago and he realised, I could be in trouble here. I need to bring forward the opening of non-essential retail and hospitality. And it just shows a real disregard because, I spoke to a local pub owner in Cardiff North and he said to me, the fact is Drakeford just doesn't get it because I own a business. How can you expect me to open with less than a week's notice if I've got to order in beer, I've got to order in food? We're working to a schedule and then he pulls the rug from under us. You know what? What the people of Wales need is confidence, certainty, and a government that is committed to rebuilding and recovering. You will not get that with Welsh Labour.
Well, this brings on perfectly because I think we'll move on to the last question now because I don't want to keep you too long. You've got plenty of doors to be knocking tomorrow, I'm both sure. So this is to both of you really. And we've had this question in many different forms. So what's the future of devolution for you and what's the vision for Wales for you under a Conservative administration? We've never seen this before, so people don't have the ideas. What's the future for devolution for you and what's the future for devolution under Conservative administration look like? So maybe there's 2 pictures you want to paint, one where it's currently going and one where you think both the Welsh Conservative Party yourselves can take it.
Go on, Joel.
Thanks, James. Well, for us, our view of a Conservative-led Senedd is an open and progressive and outward-looking Wales, a Wales that is committed to working as a proud part of the United Kingdom, but also showing the United Kingdom how things are done, leading by example with first-class education, a national health service that is well funded and supported, first-class public services, but also a place where businesses can thrive, succeed, and do well. We will appeal to businesses and investors, and we will create jobs, because we know that for too long, people have not had good, well-paid, secure employment in Wales. We know that that's fundamental. If you look at the poverty stats in Wales, I think we're some of the worst in Europe. And that is a direct responsibility of the Welsh Labour government. And you know what? I'm telling you these things because I want to do something about it. James and I want to address this. We want to do something about it. We're not going to blame Westminster. We're going to take responsibility. We're going to show them how it's done, and we're going to address these issues. So vote for change on the 6th of May. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, and I put the same question to you, James. What's your vision for the future?
Ditto what Joel said, really, and what I believe a Welsh Conservative government will do for the people of Wales is have a government that works for the whole of Wales, which wants to level up the whole of Wales, which is an education system that delivers for every child in Wales, creates jobs in every part of Wales, has brilliant healthcare in all parts of Wales, and works closely with the UK government to improve the whole nation of the United Kingdom, working with a joined-up approach with Westminster to benefit everybody. That's the Conservative government we want. Joel's given you the specifics of where we're going. So I encourage every single person, get out on May the 6th, vote for change, vote for great candidates who want to support a growing, vibrant Wales, and vote Welsh Conservative.
Thank you. I'd just like to thank you both. We didn't want to do it too long tonight, as I mean, we've only 3 of us tonight. So, but thank you both for these questions, because, like you said, this is the first generation where we're going to see children of devolution voting. We've got children of devolution that are actually standing, people that have lived this experience, not where it's some faraway, fun, abstract project like we see for so many, especially those in government. It's been a fun project, but they've never had to live under it. So it's been very interesting to hear people that have lived and grown up under it and have families under it now and are standing for the very first time at this level. So it's fantastic, and I wish you both luck with your campaigns in the remaining 7 or 8 days or whatever's left now. So I'm sure you boys know better than me. So I wish you both the best, and yes, thank you everyone for tuning in. Cheers, guys.